Okay. So tonight our program is about growing the healthful herbs. One of the things that we like to do in the wintertime is dream about our gardens when it's snowy and icy outside. But right now in January is the time for a lot of us to start our seeds for our herbs that we're going to grow in the summertime. A lot of our herbs take a long time they either take a long time to germinate, or they need to have some cold period, or they just grow really slowly. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get along into the program. And I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and for switching to Zoom on short notice. And okay, we're going to talk about what is an herb. I think probably most everybody here knows what an herb is, but just in case, we'll clarify it a little bit. There's two ways the word herb is used, in a sense that it is any plant with leaves, seeds, roots, or flowers that are used for flavoring, food, medicine, perfume, or aromatherapy, things like that. That's probably what we mostly think of an herb, but an herb also means something that dies to the ground after flowering. And for some of you that are hardcore gardeners, it's kind of the difference between a herbaceous peony and a tree peony, because the herbaceous peony dies back in the wintertime to the ground, whereas a tree peony stays in its place all summer. So, generally herbs are not considered trees, but there are some exceptions. Rosemary is one that comes to mind, that still stays kind of a bush. It doesn't really die back to the ground in the wintertime. At least sometimes it doesn't our winters, but in its native area, it does not die back to the ground. So we're focused tonight on plants that used for healing or culinary use, or as aromatherapy, and we use the leaves, flowers, seeds, or roots. And roots meaning a bulb, tuber, corm, or rhizome, as well as what you think of as traditional roots. I'm going to start with Mediterranean herbs because a very, very a huge amount of herbs that we grow for cooking and for healing come from the Mediterranean area. It's really a lopsided thing as opposed to herbs from other parts of the world. So some of the things that you've heard of are the perennials are sage and other salvias, rosemary, oregano, marjoram, lavender, savory, tarragon, mint, yarrow, fennel, sorrel, lovage, bay leaves. Those are all in their native Mediterranean area where it doesn't get as cold and wet as it does here. Those are considered perennial plants. Some other annuals and biennials: cumin, marjoram, summer savory, parsley, salad béarnaise, cilantro / coriander. They are the same plant. Cilantro is the herb plant material, and coriander is the seed. Dill, fennels, caraways, more salvias, the clary sage. And a lot of people consider honorary herbs that have been in the Mediterranean for so long that some people even consider them Mediterranean herbs, and those would be basil, garlic, chervil, and chives are some examples of that. And so just a little geography lesson. This is the area that's considered the Mediterranean area, and it's southern Europe. a little bit of the Middle East, and Northern Africa, all that border the Mediterranean Sea. They all have a similar climate, and with warm, dry summers, cool winters, but they don't get a lot of snow and a lot of wet. And that's why a lot of the Mediterranean herbs suffer in Michigan, because of our winters tend to be wet. We have snow, we have melting snow, sometimes water that sits on frozen ground for a long time. That's kind of what those types of plants are not really fond of. So they do get snow in that area in the higher elevations. The soil tends to be sandy and hilly. And the reason we look at where these plants come from is because that's kind of how they tell us they want to grow. We certainly can grow most of the plants that we're talking about tonight in Michigan. And so it's just where you site them, you want to put them in places that have well-drained soil, full sun, and not being, like a lower place where water pools, especially like melting snow and stuff, so that there's a lot of water on them for long periods of time. So yeah, otherwise people, we can grow sage, oregano, lavender, and thyme. And they overwinter in Michigan, usually. Lavender can be a little tricky. Some make it a few years and then they kind of peter out. So, and again, it's usually when we've had a long, wet winter, that sometimes they just can't make it. Some of the things just can't take our winters at all. Rosemary is one, marjoram, winter savory, bay, which is actually another one like rosemary that doesn't die back to the ground. It's actually a small tree. And some of the tender salvias and lavenders must be overwintered indoors or started again from cuttings, whatever you prefer. So those and others, we're going to start with growing annual herbs from seed. Again, annuals don't take quite as long because they're annuals, they grow a little faster. So if you want to start in March, for starting those seeds, you would want to start cumin, marjoram, summer savory, salad Bernay, calendula, caraway. Those can all be started in March. Calendula in particular can be started early because it can be put out early. It's pretty frost hardy. And start in April or direct sow in May for basil, borage, bulb fennel, chamomile, dill, and red clover. You can either start them inside in April, or you can just wait. They all grow pretty fast. I like direct seeding things, and once you have some of these things, they'll come, if they are allowed to seed in your garden, they'll come up on their own out in your garden. So if you're starting herbs indoors, you want to use a high quality, well-draining soil mix. It all starts with the soil. That's the most important thing to consider. That's how that can make or break your seed starting experience. Many of these are small seeds and they need light to germinate. So you just need to press them into the surface of the soil. You don't need to poke a hole and put them down in there. They may never germinate. Sorry about that. Keep your herbs in a warm place. We highly recommend a heat mat. It keeps the soil in your seed starting at about 70 degrees or so, which greatly increases your rate of germination. Gently water them, keep them moist but not soggy. Could you close that door, Alta? Yeah, thanks. and provide gentle air circulation. I don't recommend that you use the plastic domes that come with some seed starting apparatuses. The domes can actually hold in the stagnant air and the humid air, and it can cause a little disease called damping off, which the plants basically get it infested with a bacterial wilt, and they just fall over and die. So if you have a small fan to put in the room, you don't have to point the fan right at the plants, but just give it gentle air circulation in the room. Provide bright light, 12 hours minimum, preferably 16 or 18 hours a day. These are all, remember, most of these herbs come from sunny areas, and they, a little closer to the equator maybe than we are. So they're used to getting a little bit more light. Now, once you start your seeds, you can plant them outdoors when nights are above 60 degrees and there's no danger of frost. You can now some of the cilantro and calendula are two plants that you can direct sow outside without waiting for things to get super warm. You might be fine doing those even in the middle of April, putting those seeds out. They're very hardy plants, but most of them you don't want to put them outside until later. Anytime you put plants out, you want to harden them off. You want to make sure that if they've been inside, that you get them used to the outdoors gradually. I do want to put in a plug for later in February. We're going to have a seed starting class where we're going to go into seed starting and a lot more detail and in person, and we'll have props and and things that we can show you, and so if you feel like this is kind of a crash course on starting from seed, we will go into it more, and it's still in plenty of time to start these annual herbs from seed after that program. Now the perennials, you want to start now. They generally take a long time to grow. Sometimes they take weeks to just germinate, and then they take a long time to grow. So don't give up on your perennial seeds if they don't leap out of the ground. They don't grow as a rule like beans or basil or something like that only takes a couple of days before they're popping out of the dirt. These are very some of them take a long time. Sometimes a light coating of a sand or a parakeet grit on the soil. The thinking of that is that the sand or parakeet grit it reflects light onto the seed and encourages germination. Most need light to germinate. Like I said, press the seeds into the surface of the soil. Keep the heat mat, again, is highly recommended for the perennials as well. Keep the soil moist but not soggy. Provide the air circulation. 16 to 18 hours a day of bright light. And could be LED lights, it can be fluorescent lights, it can be sunlight coming in a window. We're not going to get that many hours a day coming in a window. So if it's good to supplement with some kind of extra light. LED lights are super inexpensive and gives them that little extra bit of light at the end of the day. So again, some of them take a long time to germinate. Lavender is notorious for not germinating for up to sometimes 2 months. That's why you have to start early so that you're not, ready. And when you're ready to plant it outside, you don't have this microscopic tiny little plant that you actually can get some growth on it before you put it outside. A couple of notes. There's 2 types of tarragon. French tarragon, which is the one that people generally like better for has a better flavor than seed-grown Russian tarragon, but unfortunately it cannot be started from seeds, so you have to start from cuttings. So if you buy tarragon seeds, they're probably Russian tarragon, and it's fine. You can still grow it, but you might want to know that there might be a better tasting tarragon out there for you. If you buy a plant that's already started, you can always take cuttings from it and keep your plants going for years. Parsley is another herb that a lot of people like to grow. It's a hardy biennial. It's good to get that going kind of early. It also does not exactly vault out of the ground. Sometimes takes a while. Soak the seed, kind of makes it germinate a little faster. But it is pretty hardy, and you put it outside, it'll grow the first year. You can harvest it. If you leave the crown in the dirt, it'll return the second year, and it'll start growing very early in the year. And then it'll send up a seed stalk and set seed. And that's awesome because you can save that seed and use it yourself, or share it with your friends and share it with the seed library. We do have something in the chat about addressing the process of hardening off. I do have a slide just on that in a few minutes. So these are just some pictures. A lot of this, if you look at the upper left-hand corner, a lot of the seeds for these are very fine seeds. So when you put them in the soil, sometimes you just kind of scatter them about, or you can put them in a section of a seed tray, or you can put them in individual seed seed cells. You can do it either way, like in the lower right-hand corner. You can do it into cells, or you can broadcast it over a large one. Using a spray bottle at first to water the seeds, as opposed to a more sturdy stream of water coming from a spigot or from a hose. You don't want to do that because it'll wash those little seeds away. So it's best that you gently water with spray bottle. It's probably one of the easiest things to use. After the seeds get in the lower left, after the seeds have started to grow, you can take them out individually. And you can use my favorite tool for that is a butter knife. You just take them out gently, tease them apart, and put them in individual cells and let them grow on. You generally wait until they get their second set of true leaves for that. Some of the other seeds that or plants that we're talking about, these are as opposed to the Mediterranean ones, although there probably are some Mediterranean ones on this list, including catnip, marshmallow. There are a couple of them that, but you might be surprised that some of these that grow literally in the wild did not start. They didn't start in the USA. They came from Europe and Asia. Possibly Africa. But most of the ones on this list require a period of stratification. And stratification is when you give them a cold period that simulates a winter, or, what passes for winter and wherever they came from originally. So the best way to deal with these, because and not all of them absolutely have to have that period of stratification. I know echinacea is one that people have started without doing it, but sometimes it just gives you that 30 days in a refrigerator gives you that extra boost so that you get a better germination rate. So you can sow them in soil. Either I use a lot of mushroom containers, things that I buy mushrooms in at the store. I save all of those. They're great little seed starting things. You can sprinkle the seeds in them, put them in seal it in a plastic bag, and put it in a refrigerator for 30 days or more. Then you pull it out let it come to room temperature, water it, put it in light and warmth, and then they'll start growing. These are all good candidates for sowing directly in the ground in the fall. You just have to prepare an area, mark it carefully, and sow the seeds, and then they will naturally stratify by being outdoors during a whole season of winter. And then we just recently had a program on winter sowing, where you sow them in possibly like a milk carton or milk jug or something like that, and put them outside. And instead of planting them right in the ground, you're planting them in a container and putting them out for the winter. A lot of people like that because they feel a little safer. Maybe it keeps the rodents out a little bit better. And then it keeps them safer from somebody walking through them. So either way, they're both using our natural cold period to stratify the herbs. But yeah, a lot of these on this list are extremely healing, especially healing herbs are on this list. Not so much, you don't see so much of these as being edible, as far as, it's not like the Mediterranean herbs where you're sprinkling them into your food, but most of these are used for healing. They're used for teas or salves, and for improving immunity, all kinds of reasons. These are all great plants. And these are, when I say they're native or naturalized, they may not have started in the US, but most of them have escaped into the wild. And they're basically considered roadside herbs at this point. So it's as I promised, anything that's been grown indoors should be hardened off before it's planted outdoors. So you've got your little seedlings, they're looking great, but they're soft, and that's just kind of a horticultural term, I guess you could say. They're soft. They haven't been exposed to, other than possibly if you put a fan in the room, that's about all the wind that they've been exposed to. And actually, full sun and wind can wipe out brand new seedlings really quickly if they're not used to it. So taking the poor little deers out and planting them in the soil and then just leaving them to the elements can definitely cause a lot of deaths in your plants. So the best thing to do is trot them in and out over a period of a week or two. Take the seedlings outdoors, put them in a protected spot, maybe under a tree at first, on a stairway. What you're trying to do is keep them out of direct sun for the first couple of days, and wind. Wind is very damaging to soft seedlings. Gradually increase that time outdoors and exposure to the sun. You can start putting them in the sun for an hour or two. Or one thing that I sometimes do is I put them on the side of a building where they get morning sun, but then they'll get afternoon shade. So that and then gradually moving them away from that spot so that they get sun all day long. It can be a pain running things in and out and bringing them in at night, whatever, but it pays off in the health and quality of your seedlings when it's time to actually plant them in the ground. And then again, almost all herbs from the Mediterranean area need full sun, well-drained soil. Some of the naturalized herbs, most of those are full sun too, but not all of them. And some can do pretty well in maybe a partial shade area where they possibly get morning sun or afternoon sun, but but it's good for them to have about 6 hours of sun. But in the scheme of things, when we have long days in the summertime, that's just a portion of the day in the shade will not usually hurt them. Let's see. You can plant, if your seedlings are still too small to plant in the soil in the spring, plant them in a larger pot and keep them in a protected area. You can leave them in a pot for the whole summer. Most herbs do very well in pots. Most herbs don't need a lot of fertilizer. As a matter of fact, fertilizer can cause them to grow soft as well if once they're hardened up. And they'll put down deeper roots if you don't constantly give them, like, you don't want to give them like Miracle-Gro. And you want to be careful about what types of fertilizers you use, especially if you're going to be eating these or using them for healing. You really don't want to use a bunch of chemical fertilizers. My favorites at home are kelp fertilizers or fish fertilizers. They're both come in a liquid form, and you can just put them in water, maybe a couple of tablespoons to a gallon of water. You don't have to put a whole lot in it. They don't smell really great, but they're really good for the plants. As I mentioned, a lot of them are well suited for growing in pots. A lot of the Mediterranean herbs enjoy, some plants don't like to be in pots because their sun hits the pot and warms it up and their roots are hot. But the Mediterranean herbs, that's kind of their thing. They grow in rocky, craggy areas and sandy soils, and they don't mind the being in a pot and growing and having their roots be warm. You do want adequate drainage holes, and possibly you can put them in glazed pots, but they do very well in unglazed pots too. You want to, if you use a high quality potting mix, if you feel that it's a little too peaty or too much organic matter, adding a little perlite or sand to lighten it up a little bit for the herbs and make it drain better is a good idea. Now, when growing herbs indoors in pots, you want to give them the brightest location you can. And especially in the wintertime, you want to keep them cool. You're trying to simulate a winter time that they would have in their natural, in the natural Mediterranean area. And you only want to water them when the soil is dry. If they look wilted, you definitely want to water them at that point. But some of the times that if they're getting too much water, they will wilt. Wilting can be a sign of too much or not enough water. So you have to stick your finger in there, see if it's already moist before you water it. Let the water, let the pot dry out a little bit between watering. Herbs that are stretching for light will get long and lanky. So having a supplemental light on them in the wintertime is a good idea. They don't, all is not lost though. If your herbs get lanky, you can give them a little haircut when you go to, especially when summer's coming, give them some of, in the spring when you're trying to bring them back to life after they've been inside all winter. You give them a little drink of that liquid fish fertilizer or kelp fertilizer, trim them back and introduce them to the outside, and they'll do really, really well. As a rule, they bounce right back and put out a lot of new growth. And if you are going to fertilize them, that's the time to do it, is in the spring. Don't do it, especially in the fall. You don't want your herbs going into the fall, whether or not they grow in pots inside or if they're growing outside for the winter. You don't want them going into the winter growing soft and putting out a lot of new growth. So you don't want to stimulate any of that by fertilizing late in the year. Herbs are really easy to start from cuttings as a rule. It's faster than starting from seed. You get a bigger plant more quickly. It's especially nice for plants like rosemary. Rosemaries are really hard to start from seed. You have to have a lot of patience to start rosemary from seed, but they start really easily from cuttings. So you want to use a high quality, well-draining soil mix with sand or perlite added, just as like you would for growing them, the actual plant itself. Put about 3 inches deep in whatever types of containers you're using. If you're using you can put a whole bunch of cuttings in just one big flat, or you can put them in the individual cells, or you can put them in pots, but you want about at least 3 inches of soil. And then you take 3 to 6 inch softwood cuttings. The softwood cutting is a tip cutting. It again, going back to rosemary or something like lavender, they can get kind of woody stems on their older stems, and the best cuttings will strike from newer growth. So you want to take those are called softwood cuttings because they're pliable. They don't have any woody look to them. So take about, I think 3 or 4 inches a good size, and remove the leaves from the lower half of the stem. If you put the leaves into the soil to root them, they're just going to rot. So, you don't want that in. You don't want them to rot when you put them in the soil, and introduce all that into the soil. Nancy asked, when do we root cuttings for rosemary plants? Well, the best time to root cuttings is when the plant is actively growing, because you do want those softwood cuttings. So I would wait until spring when the plant is putting out new growth. That's a great time to start a bunch of cuttings. So after you put them in a warm place, heat mats are great for starting cuttings, just like they are for germinating seeds. Keep them moist but not soggy. That's always the secret there. You don't want, I guess some people have put it like a piece of cake. If you take a piece of cake, it can feel moist, but then when you squeeze it, it doesn't. It still kind of bounces back. If you squeeze it and it stays, squeezed and squishy, then that means there's way too much moisture in it. So you want them to be moist but not soggy. I don't know if anybody has a better way to describe it, but I thought the cake thing was kind of interesting. Again, you want to give them good air circulation. Don't put them under a dome. Some people say put the whole thing in a bag and tie the bag. I guess the only time that would be called for, putting a dome or a bag, putting the whole pot inside a bag to start the cuttings, is if you have a particularly dry, like if your house has no humidity in it. I know. I just find out most of the time covering the cuttings or seeds just creates more problems than it solves. Again, don't put your cuttings or your seedlings in direct sunlight. They can overheat, and that is not a good thing. And then grow it, and like any other, just like a seedling, you want to harden them off before planting them out. And some people root in water. Some people have really good luck with it. I've had good luck with it with some house plants, but I've never really had great luck with trying it with herb cuttings. And honestly, I haven't tried a whole lot, but there's some people that swear by it. So, I mean, you could certainly give it a try. I mean, the people who grow hydroponically, they're managing it somehow. But they usually have systems that provide nutrients and et cetera, that are pH controlled, and the nutrients are added to the water. What we're doing on a home scale is kind of a little bit different than that. But just like if you're taking cuttings for soil, take the cuttings and remove the leaves from a lower portion. You don't want any leaves to be in the water, because they're just going to make the water skunky. Change the water frequently. Some people say every day, every couple of days. And watch closely. If they start to form roots, you don't want them to get too long. You don't want to fill up the container you've got them in with a bunch of roots. Those roots were growing and were formed to pull the nutrients out of water, and trying to take those roots and introduce them to soil, sometimes they're not, that's not the optimum way to do it. So it's actually best to pot them into soil when the roots are fairly small. I would say maybe ideally no longer than a half an inch. When you pot them up, you take care not to damage the roots. You put the soil in the pot. You make a big crater in the middle. Nestle the cutting down in there and kind of pull the dirt in around it just very carefully so you don't knock any roots off or damage them. And then keep them sheltered, again, out of direct sun, keep them modestly watered until they're well rooted. And then you can plant them outdoors or plant them in a pot, whatever you want to do with them at that point. Now, some herbs really respond well to dividing, and not all, you can't do it with everything, but some of them that you can divide are lovage and mint and tarragon and thyme, nettles, wear gloves, comfrey, sage, yarrow. The trick is to make sure that there's enough of the plant with growing points to divide, because if you just have one plant and it's only got one stem coming up from it, that's not a good candidate for dividing. In the picture, we've got chives, and they're an excellent candidate for dividing because chives are so hardy, you can probably just stick a shovel in there and pull them apart and you'll be fine. Or you can tease them apart carefully, however you prefer. But you can see there's multiple stems coming out of the soil. Something like sage, a sage plant that sometimes those, as they grow, they kind of grow sideways and they will root along different locations. And so with those, you want to isolate a section of it that is rooted into the soil and separate it from the mother plant. And so, you want to have a fairly mature plant to do that with. I see that we have Oregon instead of oregano up there. I'm sorry about that typo. Comfrey is another one that it's a big plant, but again, you just stick your shovel in and, pull off a hunk and start a new plant, and you'll have comfrey all over your yard before you know it. I think that we covered everything there. So you've been growing your herbs all summer, you're doing great, and now it comes time to harvest and dry them. The best time to harvest most herbs is before they start to flower. That's when they're at their peak for flavor. And before the plant starts putting a lot of energy into making seed, for those who do make seeds. It's best if they're growing outdoors to harvest them in the morning. That herbs that have been sitting out in the sun all day sometimes lose their flavor. They're the most flavorful in the morning. Just basically rinse them, pat them dry with a towel, and allow them to air dry. If you want to dehydrate them, you can dehydrate them a food dehydrator at a low setting, or you can just put them in an open oven on a very low setting for a couple of hours. You can be bundled together. You can tie them with string or twine, or the other thing, before you tie the string or twine around them, but the thing to do is put a rubber band around them, because as the water leaves the plant and it starts to dehydrate, the stems get thinner, and they can actually fall out of their where they were tied together. And so you want to, if you use a rubber band around them, the rubber band kind of responds a little bit and doesn't, you won't lose so many that way. But then after you rubber banded them, you can tie them with twine to whatever you want. I've seen them hung the picture up at the top. You can just tie a rope across and tie them to that. You can, I've seen people use like a spring from or the spring from an old crib, have it hanging upward and dry and hang things from that. There's 1,000 different things you can use to dry your herbs, and some of them you can make them be quite attractive. And so it's always kind of cool to go in somebody's house when they got their herbs hanging around, and it looks very homey and kind of like you've gone into the swamp witches kitchen. But you got to be careful, because if you leave them up too long, then they get dusty, and nobody wants to eat or use dusty herbs. So unless you're using them for a decoration, once they're dry, it's best to take them down and remove the leaves from the stems and put them in a jar. You can certainly use a vacuum sealer if you want to go that way. You just have to make sure that before you put them in anything that's sealed, like a jar or a Ziploc bag, whatever you're going to put them in, is that they're totally dry. Because if you put them inside those bags with any kind of dampness, you might end up with mold in your product, and that's not good. So yeah, some type of airtight container is always good. So many of the herbs we're talking about today have compounds that support health and healing. At the very least, use them in cooking. They provide flavor. But for medicinal use, most people use them in a tea, or they dry them and take them either in as a capsule or as a salve, or even put them in your not distiller, I'm blanking on the word, but so that you can use them as aromatherapy. As with all herbal medicine, we always want to make sure that if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, or if you have a chronic illness or on prescription medications, please consult with your doctor, do some reading, and use caution before consuming large amounts of any herb. A little bit of any herb doesn't hurt much of anybody, but if you're taking it for medicinal use, where you're taking you're eating or drinking quite a bit of it, there are some herbs that can, if you're on blood thinners, they can affect that. Or if you're, and again, if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, always be super, super careful what you're putting in your body. As you know, it ends up in your baby's body. So, you just want to make sure that you do a lot of research. And then I'm a big proponent of using organic herbs and products, whether you grow your own, grow them organically, or if you buy them. I always prefer buying organic herbs and products. You really don't want to, take the chance of any chemicals going into your body when you're trying to use these herbs for healing, especially, and then you're also taking in pesticides or herbicides. That's not a great thing. There's someone said that they have a difficult time separating thyme leaves and stems. The stems are fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using those. And if you want to grind them somehow, if you've got, I have this little tiny, looks like a little miniature food processor, and we use that for, you can use it for, like grinding up flax seeds, or you can use a coffee grinder, anything like that. You just don't want to run it so much that you actually pulverize the herb into, a powder, unless that's what you're looking for. But you definitely can eat the stems too. And some people use, they'll put a whole sprig of thyme or some of the other kind of woody herbs in their cooking and just remove it right at the end. Let's see, a recommendation for a good recipe book. Some of you might have heard of Mountain Rose Herbs. They just came out. I don't think I have it here. They just came out with a brand new book. And it's one of the nicest herbal books I've seen in a long time, with a recipe book. But at the library, we do have quite a few books on herbs and using herbs for health. I hope that if you want to come on in and see what we've got. And we also, of course, we're in the library is in a consortium, and we can get books from other libraries too if we don't have it here or if ours is checked out. But yeah, that Mountain Rose book is one of the nicest books that I've seen in a long time that come down the pike that on this subject of healing herbs. Somebody said recently built a 500 square foot raised bed to grow herbs this spring. Should I group the same kind together or plant them willy-nilly? Well, yeah, that's a really good question. And you want to grow, I think grouping them according to their needs is a good idea. Like if you got the Mediterranean herbs and so you've got a 500 square foot raised bed, you've got various zones, you've got down the middle, you can put tall things in the middle and shorter things on the side, or you can, but maybe put the things in one area that don't require a lot of water, and then maybe in another spot you'll have things like basil, which likes a little more water, not a ton, but and you can put maybe your perennials and make sure that your perennials are in a certain area, and then your annuals, or you can intersperse the annuals in around the perennials. Yeah, there's a lot, but I think I would consider size too, that something that grows small and kind of diminutive, or maybe a creeping herb. You don't want that being overshadowed by something that's a real aggressive grower. And again, your annuals are going to grow a little more aggressively, a little larger. A parsley plant can get surprisingly large during the course of unless you're hacking at it constantly. But you can solve that by growing a lot of it. Or basil can get really large. Some of again, there's the little small basils with the small leaves, or the big giant large leaf basils. So you kind of look at when you're buying and the flowering things too, you look at the seed packet if you're starting them from seed, and say, well, what does this say that it gets a foot tall, or is it going to get 3 feet tall? I grew calendula last year, which it's a flower, but I've always grown them, but for some reason they really were happy, and they literally got 6 feet tall. They were the most enormous, not calendula, I'm sorry, cosmos, I'm trying to say. They got super tall. So, fortunately they were growing with some Jerusalem artichokes and things like that were also tall, so it didn't really matter. But if I'd been growing those with some other things, they would have completely taken them over. So you kind of keep watch for size, watch for their needs, their water needs in particular, and sun. So and if sometimes if you have a big raised bed like that, you've got some things that are, maybe part of it's going to get some little bit of shade from a tree, and some of it's going to be in full sun. So, you got to look at that too. Put the Mediterranean herbs maybe in the full sun, and the things that aren't quite so demanding of full sun can be put in other places, like parsley. I've grown parsley and where it doesn't get sun till the afternoon. It gets shade all morning. It does great. It may not grow as big, but sometimes if you have part stage situations, the plants, they still grow. They might not grow as big. They might not grow as full, but you can still grow them. I wouldn't want, if you have no full sun or very little full sun, I wouldn't want you to not grow your plants, not grow herbs because you think you haven't got enough sun. So we're going to quickly go through some of the ways to use your herbs. Tea is probably one of the easiest and most popular things, and you can make blends. Some like Monarda is a common garden plant that, it's called bergamot. It's a fabulous tea plant. It smells great. So sometimes you may already have things out in your yard growing that you can use for tea. So basically 1 or 2 tablespoons of fresh herb to a cup of water, or maybe of dried herbs, because they're more concentrated, maybe only a tablespoon for a cup of water. Let them steep for 15 or 20 minutes. Now, when you notice we say simmering water, it's found that the herbs are more healthful. You retain more of the healthful components of the herb if you don't put boiling water right on them. It's good to let the water stop boiling and then pour it over. That's kind of, just generally, you're preserving more of the healthful components. You can add lemon if you want to use some honey or other sweetener that's totally up to you. And then for external use, like some people use some types of herbal teas to put on their skin. Chamomile, calendula are both known for, being really good for skin if you have skin conditions or itchiness and dry skin and things. Those can all be. And in the summertime, if you refrigerate an herbal tea, you can make the tea a little stronger, keep it in a refrigerator, and in the summer you can, just pour some of it on a washcloth, put it on your forehead or wherever else you want to cool off. So herbal teas can definitely be used warm or cold. Vinegar is a popular way to use vinegars. People that love to make their homemade salad dressings and marinades. You can definitely kind of change things up a little bit by putting herbs in your vinegar. But yeah, about a cup of herbs, fresh herbs or dried, can be used. If you're using fresh herbs, though, let them lay like on a cookie sheet or something for 24 hours, or you can hang them upside down. You want to wilt them because you actually want some of that moisture to go away so that you're not adding a bunch of moisture to your vinegar mixture. But yeah, cup of herbs to 2 cups vinegar. You can use any kind of vinegar you like. You can use wine vinegar, you can use cider vinegar, you can use wine vinegar, balsamic, whatever you have and whatever you prefer to use. And then so if you put them in the jar, vinegar can be hard on the lid. So if you have a metal lid, like a canning jar lid, maybe put a little plastic wrap, or use a plastic lid. You want to put something between the vinegar and that metal to prevent it reacting. So just cap the jar tightly, shake it to mix well. Put a label on it. You'd be surprised. Maybe not. Everybody doesn't forget things like I do, but sometimes I'll pull out a jar and look at it and go, "What was that?" Sometimes after the herb's been in the vinegar for a while, it's darker. Its leaf shape may be different, so it might be hard to tell. So I'm always saying, label your jar, put it in a cool, dark place. You can take it out and kind of give it a little spin, if you want to. You don't have to, but you can do that every few days. It's always a good idea to visit your potions and things that you're making every couple of days and make sure everything's going okay. And so 2 to 4 weeks, you strain out the herbs, and you can use cheesecloth, a coffee filter, whatever, clean dishcloth, whatever it is you want to use to strain it. And then you can put your vinegar into glass bottles and store it in a cool, dark place. As tempting as it is to store them, in a place of prominence where they look real pretty sitting on a shelf, or even worse, in a window, don't do that. Especially don't put them in a window. The sun shining through the jars is really pretty, but it's gonna
It's recording it. So what does that mean?
Vinegar, and it just won't be a good product after that. It's not gonna preserve the healthfulness of your herbs or the flavor. So keep it in a cool, dark place. If you want to, if you're giving them as a gift, you can put a fresh sprig of the herb in the vinegar for bottling it to make it pretty. And you can just tell them, you can leave it in there, take it out, whatever they want to do. Tinctures can be made. They're used. Sometimes vodka is commonly used because it's an edible, high alcoholic liquid that will pull the components out of the herbs very nicely. Some people use vegetable glycerin, but if you're opposed to using alcohol, and some people don't want to use alcohol in any form, there are other methods to do it. But again, wilt the herbs or dry them before you put them in, so that they aren't bringing a lot of extra moisture to the project. So fill up the glass jar with the herb halfway. Add the vodka so the level of the liquid is at least 2 inches above the herb. Again, please put plastic wrap between the lid and the jar, or use a plastic lid. And again, seal the jar tightly and put the date that you did it on it. Again, shake it a couple of times a day for a month, and then squeeze the liquid out through the cheesecloth and store in a glass container. For best results, keep it refrigerated till you need it. Obviously, they didn't do that in the olden days, but it keeps your product better longer, and if you do it that way. And it's important. We always recommend glass over plastic or metal for storing things made from herbs. Okay. There we go. Sorry about that. And the same thing can be done with oils as you do with the vodka. You're just basically putting mixing them 2/3 of the jar with dried herbs or flowers. Again, you don't want, especially with the oils, I think more than any of the others, you're best to start with dried or wilted herbs or flowers. You don't want to bring that moisture into the oil. Pour the oil into the jar. Most people use olive oil. You can use other oils. Some people use jojoba, grapeseed, almond oil, all work well too. Make sure to cover the herbs by at least 1 inch with the oil, because the herbs will expand, and stir well and cap it tightly. Now this one you can put in a sunny windowsill if you want, or you don't have to put it in a windowsill. That's an option. But in this case, the oils, keeping them warm helps with this process a little bit. 4 to 6 weeks, strain the herbs out using a cheesecloth, and pour the oil into glass bottles and store in a cool, dark place. And I always recommend refrigerating. You can use this oil to make salves. You can make compresses with it. You can use it for dressings, but especially if you're going to be eating it, I would store it in the refrigerator. Now, some people do actually warm. Oh, somebody is saying that somebody needs to turn their mic off. I think I can do that from here. Yeah, if you're unmuted, then people can hear everything that's going on in your house, in your home. Some people warm the oil first before they put or they'll put the oil in a stainless steel saucepan. We'll warm it gently, you don't want to make it hot, but just warm it and put the herbs in and then put them in the jar. That's another way you can do it. And some people do that if they don't want to wait the whole 4 to 6 weeks, if they want to make their product a little faster. So that's an option too. Now, one thing you can use your oil for is for herbal salves, and salves are a lot of fun to make. That's one of my favorite things to do with herbs. But you can, if you have 4 ounces of oil, a half an ounce of beeswax. Beeswax comes in, you can get it in chunks, chopped, little like pebbles, whatever, and then you can add an essential oil to it if you want to. Some people put like lavender oil in it or something, that's though, and you can also use something like if you were using a calendula salve like we are showing in the picture. That was our herb of the month several months ago, and the salve that is shown there is some salve that one of the people made, and they actually brought me in that little tin, and it was really cool. So you can combine the beeswax and the oil in a double boiler, heat until the beeswax melted, but it's a double boiler. You don't want to bring it to a boil. You're just trying to melt the wax and stir in the essential oil. And again, that's optional whether if you want fragrance or not. Get a good quality essential oil, and then pour into tins. I'm a compulsive saver of tiny little glass jars and things like that, because they always are nice for putting these little salves in, especially if you want to give them as gifts. Allow it to cool completely before placing the lid on, and store it in a cool, dry place. And salves are pretty shelf stable, can last 2 or 3 years. Now, having said all this, if you want to not use the beeswax and you use olive oil, as you may well know, when you refrigerate it, it becomes fairly solid on its own. So if you don't want a shelf-stable product, shelf-stable meaning that it's fine to use just sitting on a shelf without having been refrigerated. You can make the recipe. You can not use the beeswax. You don't even have to stir in the essential oil, but when pour it in the jar, put it in the fridge, and it's going to become solid. Now, when you take it out of the fridge and put it on your skin, it's going to be less creamy and more oily it'll like literally melt into your skin. But that's that's fine too. So that's even easier because you don't have to source your beeswax and deal with it. It's not quite as messy of a project. Just using oil. But some oils are not do not get hard when you put them in a fridge, and again, you can certainly do that. You're just, it's just the beeswax or the olive oil is really nice to use when you're not using the beeswax. I make my favorite type of salve to make is jewel weed, and I usually put a little plantain in it, maybe some calendula, and that way that's great for poison ivy.
What happened? Yeah.
Sorry.
There. Thank you.
I'm back. I
Good.
think what I said at the end was that my favorite thing to make was jewel weed salve for poison ivy. I'm sorry if there's a little button here that I accidentally bumped that turned everybody's sound off. I'm not hearing you guys at all, so I don't know what's going on with that. So I'm kind of flying blind here, so definitely I'm going to have to rely on the chat if you have any questions. So that kind of ends it for tonight. Now, as I mentioned before, on it's Monday. I'm not very prepared here. Monday, July, or February. I'll get it, Pam. I'm going to get the date for you of the seed starting program. That will be 19th. February 19th, we're going to do a seed starting program that will be in person. For those of you who are wanting to learn how to start seeds, all different kinds of seeds, I'll have all kinds of different stuff here that you can try out or kind of look and see and touch and feel. And I also usually always have a door prize or 2 or 3. So for the people who come, it can be really cool stuff sometimes. So try to go ahead and sign up for that if you can. Is this presentation available to be shared? We will send you a link to the presentation depending on the weather and whether our computer tech makes it in tomorrow. But she will send out a link to this program, the recording of this program to everybody, so that you can go through it if you want. If you want to share it with somebody, that's fine. A question before that about jewelweed. Yes, jewelweed really works. It's been used since the dawn of time. It is actually even grows near poison ivy, and they like similar conditions. And it's and you know people a long time ago, back in the olden days, would if they got into poison ivy, they'd quick find some jewelweed and rub it on and to sometimes it would stop it before it starts. But yeah, it's amazing stuff. I'm always amazed that it's not marketed more for it, because I have shared my salve with people that have at their wits' end with poison ivy. They can't get rid of it. They can't heal it. It's driving them crazy, or it's driving their kids crazy. And they said it works like a miracle. So a program where we make the poison ivy salve, well, that sounds like a great idea. I think we should do that. Jewelweed grows all around here. It's in, here at the library. It grows in this kind of wooded area right just north of the library. That's where I harvest all mine every year. And you will find it on stream banks. I see it all the time on the bike trail. As I'm walking by, I see it down the poison ivy queen. I'm sorry, Gail. That's not great. So yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea. We'll aim for that maybe in July, because the jewelweed you can pick it after it flowers, and you can pick it, but it depends on who you talk to. They say pick it before it flowers. It's at its peak. Other people say wait till it flowers to pick it. So I've done it both ways, and it works great. So okay, I'll put that down. Jewelweed program in July. We'll do it. And maybe we'll even go out and show you here at the library what it looks like, where we can find. And then once you see what it looks like, you'll see it everywhere. You'll see it when you're driving down the road. You'll say, "Oh, look at it! It's over there." Once it flowers, you really can see it. So, all righty. Any other questions before we sign off for the night? Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So, again, I will send the link out if for some reason that you don't have the ability to watch the recording. We do, obviously have computers here at the library that you're welcome to use. We have Chromebooks, and you can check out a Chromebook and take it into or you can take it home, or you can take it into the one of the study rooms and watch the recording, or anything else you want to do with a computer. I always like to throw that out there. Some people don't realize that. Yeah, everybody, I'm glad you're home safe and sound, and we're really looking forward to seeing some of you at the seed starting program and beyond. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.